Sir,
The fire's spreading fast. We need backup now.
Over there, direct the crew left. Hurry!
The young fire captain barely glanced at the weathered old man in the faded denim jacket. We've got trained professionals handling this. The old man's eyes never left the ridgeline where orange flames licked the afternoon sky. Son, that fire's gonna jump the canyon in 20 minutes. Your trucks won't make it. The captain turned away, already shouting orders into his radio. Behind him, 73-year-old Harold Briggs watched the wind shift exactly as he knew it would. If you believe real heroes don't always wear uniforms, type respect in the comments right now. Harold Briggs had lived in the small mountain community of Cedar Falls for 11 years. To his neighbors, he was simply the quiet man in the old cabin at the end of Miller Road. He kept to himself mostly, tended a small vegetable garden, and walked his aging German shepherd named Duke along the fire roads each morning before dawn. Few knew anything about his past. He never spoke of it. The only hints were the rough, scarred hands that seemed too hardened for a man who appeared to do nothing but garden, and the way his eyes constantly scanned the tree lines whenever the summer winds picked up. That August afternoon, when the first plumes of smoke appeared over Black Ridge Canyon, Harold had been watching the sky for 3 days. He knew what was coming before the first evacuation sirens wailed. The Black Ridge fire had started from a downed power line during a windstorm. By the time the county fire department arrived, it had already consumed 800 acres of dry brush. The initial attack crews set up their command post at the Cedar Falls Community Center, where frantic residents gathered seeking information about their homes. Harold arrived on foot, Duke limping beside him, and approached the perimeter where firefighters scrambled to deploy equipment. He'd tried to speak with 3 different crew members before the young captain finally acknowledged him, only to dismiss him like a confused elderly evacuee who'd wandered into the wrong place. Harold didn't argue. He simply walked to the edge of the parking lot and continued watching the ridgeline, calculating wind speed, humidity, and fuel load in his head the way he'd done 1,000 times before in another life. The fire's behavior changed at exactly 4:17 in the afternoon. Harold saw it happen. The convection column tilted sharply eastward as a thermal inversion pushed the flames down the canyon slope directly toward an isolated cluster of homes known as Pine Hollow. 23 families lived there. The only road in was the same road out, and it curved directly beneath the advancing fire's path. The captain was still focused on protecting the main evacuation route into town, his crews stretched thin across 3 miles of frontage. No one was watching Pine Hollow. Harold approached once more. "Captain, you've got 23 families trapped back. There. Your engines can't reach them in time." The captain's jaw tightened. "Sir, I told you to stay back. We know what we're doing." Harold's voice dropped low, steady, carrying decades of authority that surprised even him. "No, son, you don't, but I do." Without waiting for a response, Harold walked to his old pickup truck parked at the edge of the lot. From the bed, he retrieved a drip torch he'd kept maintained for 11 years, a relic from his former life that he'd never been able to part with. He drove past the roadblock while the captain shouted after him. The gravel road to Pine Hollow wound through a narrow corridor of manzanita and dry grass, the perfect fuel for the inferno now cresting the ridge above. Residents were already panicking, loading cars, some fleeing on foot. Harold drove past them all, stopping at a small meadow 300 yards ahead of the fire's path. He stepped out of his truck, ignited the drip torch, and began walking a deliberate line through the dry grass, setting it ablaze. A woman screamed from her porch. Someone called him a madman. A man ran toward him, shouting to stop. But Harold didn't stop. He walked steadily, methodically, the flames from his torch spreading in a controlled line that advanced away from him toward the approaching wildfire. It was called a backfire, the oldest trick in wildland firefighting. You rob the main fire of its fuel by burning it away first. The flames Harold set consumed the grass and brush in a fast, low burn that left nothing but black ash in its wake. when the Black Ridge fire came roaring down the slope minutes later, expecting to devour Pine Hollow in its path, it met Harold's burned-out strip and stopped. The convection column faltered. The fire lay down. 23 families watched from their driveways as the monster that had been seconds from destroying everything they owned simply died at the edge of a blackened meadow, turned away by an old man with a drip torch and knowledge they couldn't begin to understand. The county fire captain arrived at Pine Hollow 18 minutes later, his engine finally cutting through after the main fire's advance had stalled. He found Harold Briggs sitting on the tailgate of his truck, drip torch extinguished beside him, Duke resting at his feet. Residents had gathered around him, some crying, some simply staring in disbelief. The captain pushed through the small crowd, his face red with anger and confusion. "You could have killed everyone here. You could have made it worse. Who the hell do you think you are?" Before Harold could answer, a voice came over the captain's radio, a familiar voice, the incident commander for the entire Black Ridge operation. "Davidson, this is I.C. Morgan. I need you to confirm something for me. Is there an older gentleman at your location, approximately 6'2", gray hair, scar on his left hand?" The captain frowned, looking at Harold's hands. The scar was there, pale and jagged across the knuckles. "Affirmative. Who is he?" The radio crackled. "That's Harold Briggs, 41 years with the Forest Service. He was the superintendent of the Redding Hotshots for 16 of those years, led the burnout operations on the Yellowstone fires of '88, the Canyon Creek Complex, the Esperanza fire." The captain's face went pale. Every firefighter knew those names. They were legends. He retired after his crew got trapped on the Yarnell Hill fire, lost 4 of his men. He testified before Congress about wildland fire policy. I.C. Morgan's voice softened. "If Harold Briggs started a backfire, Captain, it's because a backfire was the only thing that was going to work. That man has saved more lives with controlled burns than most firefighters save in their entire careers. Consider yourself lucky he was there." The captain turned slowly to face Harold, the anger draining from his expression, replaced by something closer to shame. Harold rose from the tailgate, his knees stiff from the effort of the last hour. He met the young captain's eyes without accusation, without vindication. There was only exhaustion and the weight of memories that never fully faded. "You did the best you could with what you knew, son. That's all any of us can do." He extended his scarred hand. After a long moment, the captain took it. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Harold nodded once. "You couldn't have. And that's all right. Just remember this next time an old-timer tries to tell you something. We're not always just confused. Sometimes we've seen things you haven't yet." Around them, the residents of Pine Hollow watched in silence, understanding now that the quiet man who'd walked into a fire zone with nothing but a drip torch had once commanded men through the worst infernos this country had ever seen. He hadn't asked for recognition. He never did. He'd simply done what he'd always done. Protected people. In the weeks that followed, the Cedar Falls community learned more about Harold Briggs than he'd revealed in 11 years of living among them. They learned about the medals he kept in a shoebox under his bed. They learned about the 4 men whose names he still whispered to himself on the anniversary of Yarnell Hill. They learned that he'd walked away from the Forest Service, not because he'd failed, but because his heart couldn't bear to lose anyone else. The county fire department invited him to consult on their wildland-urban interface planning. Local schools asked him to speak. He declined most of it, preferring his garden and his morning walks with Duke. But every now and then, when the winds shifted and the skies turned hazy with distant smoke, Harold Briggs could be found at the fire station, coffee in hand, quietly sharing what 41 years of flame and ash had taught him with anyone willing to listen. The young captain, Davidson, became one of his most frequent visitors. Some lessons, it turned out, could only be learned from those who'd walked through the fire and come out the other side. They say you can't judge a book by its cover. Harold Briggs proved that some books carry entire libraries within them, waiting for the moment they're needed most. He never saw himself as a hero. Heroes, he'd say, were the ones who didn't come home. He was just a man who understood fire, who'd given his life to fighting it, and who couldn't stand by while it threatened people he'd quietly grown to care about. If this story reminded you that wisdom often comes in unexpected forms, that the quiet ones among us may carry the greatest strength, then do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Because every week we share stories of hidden heroes, quiet courage, and the moments that remind us why respect for those who've served is never something that should have to be earned twice.